Hey everyone, it's Effie and welcome back to the channel. So now that some time has passed since Global has released and we know that we are getting accelerated banners and whatnot and the whole debacle with compensation and all that, which I won't get into in this video, but considering that we are getting retimed banners to try and keep on pace or at least get up to and catch up with the other regions, today I'll be going through my summon guide from my personal opinions on who to summon for in P5X Global. Now again, this is just purely based on my biases, basically who I've used on the other regions. I have been playing on the Taiwan account for almost a year now, as well as sort of recommendations here and there about who to sort of pick up and why I think you should pick up these certain units. So I can inform you on who's actually like pretty good to pull for, who are must pulls in this game, essentially, quote unquote, and who that I think you could probably skip and or just wait for the rerun if you really want to save up for a certain character. Now, obviously, just like with any other pulling video or any other guide, just make sure that you're having fun first. So pull for whoever you want. Even if I say, you know, to skip, if you really enjoy the character, then definitely pull for the character. Your enjoyment is more important than my opinions. So sit back and relax, and then we're going to be going into the summon guide, and let's try and build up this P5X community and stay positive with Global. Please stay positive with Global. But before this video begins, definitely don't forget to leave a like and subscribe on the video. Definitely helps out the channel a bunch, as well as the YouTube algorithm. And don't forget to join the Gacha Rebels Discord, link in the description. We have an amazing community on there, so come on, join, come and hang out, and then catch my live streams as well. It's always a good and fun time. Alright, so we're going to be starting off with pretty much the basics, basically. So basically, these are the categories I have. So people that I'm definitely playing A6, R6 for. People that I think I'll be playing for like A1 at least, just because the awareness gives it a considerable power increase, and then A0, R0. Now with the weapon pulls, I will mention quickly, in general with weapon pulls, you don't necessarily need everyone's weapon or everyone's signature weapon. The 4-star equivalent is perfectly fine from Iwaya Shop, for example. But you know, in my personal opinion, I don't feel like the character is complete without their signature weapon, so I'll most likely pull for their signature weapon as well. But just keep in mind, you don't need the signature weapon necessarily. There are a few characters where I feel like signature weapon is a massive upgrade, which I won't be going over too much detail into who, but basically just assume in this list that I've been pulling for their signature weapon. Alright, so we're going to go over the 4-stars first. So obviously, you know, Lufel, Closer, I should say. Soy, Moko, Sepia, Yuki, Ki, Mont, Okyan, Puppet, Florette, Leon, and then eventually we'll be getting Vino. Now, Vino is very, very good. I highly recommend that we'll talk about it, but when Queen comes out, I highly recommend that, you know, Vino will most likely be on the banner, and I do recommend that at least get one copy of Vino, but A6 Vino is really, really good. Rico is very, very good, as same with Luce, very, very good. Oh, and I should also say minor spoilers for new characters that are coming out in case you're just global only. But again, you're probably watching this video because you want to know who to summon for. I won't be going over any story spoilers though, so yeah. Alright, Luce is really, really good. The next standard thing that you get as well. Anyway, alright, so we have An first on the list, so obviously free standard, Ryuji free standard, Morgana free standard, Riddle free standard. And then Rin free standard as well. So already on the banners is Joker, and Joker is definitely an A0, R0 in my personal opinion. Joker's awarenesses aren't that great, so you know, like obviously, like I know in one of in the Gacha Rebels, a certain person that actually has A6 on that bad boy, and it actually does wonders, but you don't have to pull for A6 if you don't necessarily want to. You can save your jewels for that one. But Joker and his weapon is definitely a pull for me, and I'll definitely be summoning for Joker, which I mean, I already have summoned for Joker. So it is what it is, but Joker is really, really good. Definitely scales well into the later regions and the later patches as well. So definitely, if you want to curse AoE DPS, Joker's your boy. Next up is Yui. Now, I did originally have Yui in the skip tier, so I will keep her in the skip tier. But because of peer pressure and because I do whatever it takes on my guild, I did actually pull for Yui. Now, Yui's a skip originally because she was very inconsistent with her follow-ups, but she actually did get a buff on Global, making her follow-up damage and electric damage actually increased by a certain percent. In fact, I think the multiplier is actually pretty decent now. I think it's like 33 or nearly like 40% or something like that, something ridiculous. But the most important one is that on her highlight, she actually is able to now follow up 2 times per, you know, team member persona on on use of Persona skill per team member. So basically that means in the other regions when she first released, basically it was just one turn. So essentially you only really get, as soon as one person on your team uses a Persona skill, she follows up once, but now she actually follows up twice, which means that consistently her consistent damage output as well as her consistent follow-up is just better in general. So in that regard, she actually is much better than she was on the other regions, for example. But again, single target in this game is always very, very hit and miss. It's very niche in certain situations because most likely you're going to need sort of AoE. But because of the follow-up arrangement that she has, definitely makes her definitely a bit more sort of valuable. But in my opinion, I think she's still a skip. I know a lot of people are skipping her because there are other characters down the line that people really, really want. So it is what it is. I did pull for her, but realistically, I don't necessarily think that she's a pull. Now, Marion, on the other hand, is, we'll move to standard. There's a whole debacle about Marion moving to standard on global, not happening straight away. I know a lot of people are upset about that. I'm not going to go into it in this video. However, Marion will eventually move to standard, so you don't have to spend your premium currency on her. I did, because I definitely wanted to guarantee that I get Marion, because she is one of the best healers in the game. She provides dispels on debuffs, she provides buffs on basically pretty much nearly all of her kit essentially, and then she provides insane heals. I think I got up to like nearly 4k or 5k heals, and I didn't even build her like that highly, for example. She's a really, really good sustain unit, but we'll be moving to standard, so you don't have to necessarily use your pulls on Marion. And then, yeah, I mean, there's not much else to say. If you want to guarantee her, definitely pull. But if you don't necessarily want to guarantee her and then you're happy with spending your standard tickets and then hopefully get her in the pool of standard units, then go for that as well. Now, the next character up is actually Yusuke, and I will actually be going into Yusuke's kit a little bit more in detail in another video. But Yusuke, for me, is a skip. Now, the reason why Yusuke is a skip is basically TLDR, is that his kit is basically revolved and scales around defense, which could be easy to build considering that me myself have been getting defense rolls on all my revelation card farms so far, which is really fucking disappointing. But it is very niche to build around sort of a Yusuke team because you definitely need Yuki, because Yuki currently in global is really the only defense unit that gives a lot of defense. For example, Puppet is also really good with Yusuke as well, and I guess he's a free-to-play unit, so a free-to-play Yusuke team will work actually wonders, to be perfectly honest. And there's an AoE ice DPS as well, or single target ice DPS. Anyway, it's an ice DPS as well for Yusuke. So eventually, there'll be ice affinities, and then that ice veil room trial, if you want to pull for Yusuke for that one, for example, is really, really good. But most of his damage comes around his counters and his abilities, for example. So it's a little bit hit and miss with Yusuke, for example. Definitely more consistent than Yui, I would say. Well, actually, I don't know about after Yui buffs. But Yusuke for me is a skip. Yeah, I mean, he's really the only ice DPS that we really, really have. I mean, obviously we have 4-star Mont and then eventually 5-star Mont. But yeah, I don't know. Like personally, I just feel like he's a little bit of a skip. However, knowing me myself and my addiction, I probably will actually pull for him eventually. But if you do want to save your pulls, then I recommend just probably skipping Yusuke, I think, just because he's a very niche scaling sort of unit. But he can still do quite a bit of damage. But in terms of top tier damage, probably will never reach that benchmark, I think. All right, the next person that I'm definitely getting for is actually Makoto. Now, I'm going to put Makoto. I was going to put her in A6 R6, but I realized I'm not going to get her R6. So I'm going to put her in A0 R0. But basically, I am definitely pulling for Makoto, definitely pulling for Makoto's weapon. Now, the reason why I'm pulling for Queen's stuff is basically she's the only nuke DPS in the game. But she, in terms of her nuke DPS and how like the nuke element works in general with like elements and stuff like that, or applying random elements, especially with Vino, as I mentioned before, the 4-star, which should premiere on her banner as well. You eventually get to a point where like all the enemies get elements that can like do damage over time, can shock, blah blah blah, do just all this random stuff, and then Queen can deal additional damage per element or per element, and then end up doing like a crap ton of damage, just basically just nuking the whole field. Hence why she's a nuke DPS, right? Well, I mean, also in Persona 5. But because of her nuke DPS title, she nukes everything. She literally nukes everything. She does a lot of damage output. Her best in slot sort of teammate is a free-to-play unit in Vino. And you can pretty much guarantee that you're going to get multiple copies of Vina just because she'll be on Queen's banner. And overall, Queen just does a lot of damage. I really love her design as well. I mean, she's one of my favorite characters in Persona 5, the original cast. So I'm definitely pulling for Queen. And I think you should too, just because you'll be able to blast through any nuke content easily. And she's really the only nuke DPS in the game so far as well. There's literally no more coming. So I feel like if you really want to guarantee nuke sort of content, then yeah, definitely pick up Queen. Now, next is our next Navigator actually coming out, should be coming out very soon after Queen and Fox, is actually Phoebe. Now, Phoebe for me is going to be moving to standard, but Phoebe is actually like really, really good because she is the next sort of, definitely an upgrade to Okian, and then the next sort of attack or attack-based or offensive-based navigator. But the thing with Phoebe that I guess sets her apart from Okian is that Okian kind of gives like low percentage attack increases, and then obviously can increase sort of like element accuracy and stuff like that. But Phoebe, however, just takes that to another level where basically she is very, very good at sort of mono teams where essentially an attribute damage and increasing attribute damage. So essentially she does buffing the attacks and stuff as well, but she also buffs skill effects as well, depending on which cocktails that she consumes. You'll find out what I mean when eventually you get to her story and her synergy. But in terms of what cocktail she consumes and what cocktail she can stack, for example, she can give additional bonuses to skill effects as well as just an insane increase to attack, and as well just in attribute damage as well. So basically, the more of the same attribute you have on the team, the more passively your actually damage scales as well. So she's a great unit for, I guess, mono teams, but she can also be slotted into basically any other team just because of her increase in skill effect with the cocktails, and that's basically how her kit sort of works. But definitely another great offensive navigator unit. Definitely probably going to be used more so than Okian. But again, if you have a really well built Okian, for example, you don't necessarily have to pull for Phoebe. But in saying that, she does move to standard. Same thing with Manami. If you want to guarantee her, pull. If you don't, and you're happy to sort of just roll the dice with the standard pull, then definitely go for that as well. Now, the next unit is Cord. Now, there's not many must-pull units in this game, but Cord is a must-pull because she buffs highlight damage. She can give an additional highlight, which essentially means you can highlight twice in a turn, and she increases attack, and she's just insane, and she's got a sick design, sick persona design, and she's just a cool guitar chick who's just cool. So the essential bit for Cord's kit is the highlight increase and an additional highlight as well. So especially units that rely on their highlights for additional bonus effects, for example, or for additional damage, or just doing shit ton of damage on their highlights, Cord is definitely a must pull. She synergizes pretty much well with every single unit in the game. Like every single unit's highlight actually does really, really well. And then basically if you can highlight twice, for example, then you essentially get all the effects of the highlights per character, obviously on a character by character basis, but you can also increase attack. She's a great buffer for that units as well. I truly believe that she's definitely a must pull in this game, and honestly, like, she's one of the units where I feel like I slot her into most teams 99.9% of the time. There's not really much else to say. Definitely pull for Cord, and I would definitely be saving for Cord if I was a free-to-play player for sure. Now, the reason why I put her into the A1 category is because as soon as you start the battle, again, I'm not going to go over too much detail into the overall skills, but as soon as you start the battle, you actually start the battle with this ability called Loyal Listener. And basically with Loyal Listener, it's essentially increases the, I think it prioritizes the max attack, I think, of the units on your team, and it gives them increased crit rate right off the bat. So as soon as you enter the battlefield, you get increased crit rate. And I mean, crit rate for DPS carries, for example, especially, like, it's obviously it's DPS, I don't have to say much, but additional crit rate helps wonders, and you instantly proc that as well on A1, and I feel like that's a massive upgrade, especially that you don't actually have to consume a skill, for example, in order to get that Loyal Listener buff, and then that way you get the passive 10% crit rate, makes building characters a little bit more easier as well. But that's my recommendation. You don't necessarily have to go for awarenesses, but that's where I would probably stop at Cord's awarenesses. All right, the next unit is Summer Closer. Now, in my opinion, Summer Closer is actually very, very good. Definitely pairs very, very well with Manami. And I feel like with Summer Closer being a blessed AoE DPS, there's really not much more that you want. There's not many Bless DPS characters in the game. There is Violet, which I'll go through eventually in the list. But Summon Closer just does a lot of damage. And again, in a Bless sort of capacity, not many of those in the game. And she pairs really, really well with Minami, another Bless sort of unit. And I mean, it's the summer skins, right? So like, obviously people are going to go for the summer skins. And I feel like Summon Closer is definitely worth the value as well. I think she scales really, really well as well. I think she's still top tier in most tier lists, especially around the other regions. Really can't go wrong with Summon Closer. So I feel like, you know, if you have the pulls for her, and I feel like a lot of people probably will save for some of the summer units, for example, then definitely go for Closer. Awareness wise, it's a bit hit and miss. I don't necessarily think you need her awarenesses. Obviously awarenesses are an upgrade, but unlike Cord, where you can instantly start the battle, and similar with Rin actually, where you can instantly start with Mumpo Soup, there's not really much that you can actually, you know, gain, I guess. But anyway, that's just my opinion, but Summon Closer is definitely a great unit. Again, Bless AoE, DPS carry, pairs super well with Minami, pairs super well with other sort of Bless personas, especially in Wonder's Kit, for example. And then, yeah, very, very niche as well. There's only other one Bless DPS unit, so I would recommend that you pull for Summon Closer. Now, Summon Moko, on the other hand, is a skip for myself. Summon Moko is definitely a massive improvement over just normal Moko. I mean, obviously, because it's a limited character. But Summon Moko, for me personally, I don't know. I just don't necessarily really like her design in the first place. And that's probably the main reason why I wouldn't pull. But also her kit is a bit meh. It's definitely an improvement. And I believe, actually, I think Summon Moko is still a top tier buffer unit, I think. And I mean, like, the thing with Summon Moko is that she kind of does the same thing as Marion, if I'm being completely honest. And I feel like with Marion as well, it's just that Marion's a standard unit and the Summon Moko isn't. So it's just like, you know, you kind of have to toss up between who you really, really want. But Summon Moko does do a lot of healing as well. Is a Psy unit as well. Will pair very, very well with Haru, actually, and can also do a little bit of defense shred here and there. But basically buffs your sort of team, does a lot of healing, does a lot of follow-up as well, and then she can do follow-up healing as well. So, you know, again, she kind of does the same thing as Marion, and that's probably the main reason why I would skip her, is because she does this pretty much the same thing as standard units, and she doesn't really necessarily excel at the buffing too much. Definitely improvement over normal Moko, but that's probably the main reason why I wouldn't necessarily pull for her, and I'd probably skip him, in my opinion. All right, next is Chuboy Mesa. Now, with Mesa, in my personal opinion, I mean, honestly, look at the guy. The guy is actually aura personified. I actually love him. I love his synergy. I love his design. I love his persona. His persona design is sick. It just looked like Edward Scissorhands or some shit. But it's just absolutely epic. And the guy is just unhinged in general. But the guy is really, really good in terms of DOT effects, and actually pairs really, really well with the brand new unit in Berry. You can proc all DOT effects at the same time, but his DOT effect is actually Almighty, and basically just means that, you know, Almighty skills run through sort of absorb, resist, and all the defensive buffs that enemies usually get. But his Almighty bleed effect does a lot of damage. Overall, though, he's not necessarily like a good, because physical DPS carriers in this game aren't that great, to be honest, just because there's, you know, just resistance is tied to that, you know, defense, and in terms of like ailments and stuff like that, not many enemies are actually weak to physical, for example, so you don't necessarily might not get the all-out attacks and the knockdown effects that certain, you know, weapon buffs and other stuff sort of give you. So he's always obviously limited in that regard, just based on his element, just because he is a physical element. But I mean, the guy is really cool. I really like him. I think his weapon looks bloody sick as well. And overall, though, in terms of his DOT, is probably one of the strongest DOTs, and probably one of the only DOTs in the game. And I think he's just a really, really cool character. He can do a lot of damage if you build him correctly, and actually paired with Berry now, he can do so much more in that sort of specific team, which is really, really cool. And I think overall, like, in my opinion, like, should you skip him? Most likely, probably. But in my opinion, because I really like him, he's just going to be in my pull tier for me personally. Now, Futaba, oh my god, okay. Futaba is one of those other units in the game that I feel like are must-pulls in this game. So Futaba, for me, is definitely 100% a must-pull, because she is the best, arguably the best navigator in the game. So Futaba is a navigator in this game, and she is arguably one of the best navigators, as I said before. And the reason being is because she has a lot of buffing capability, and she also has weakness implant or weakness damage increase. So essentially what she can do is that she can hack the enemies to the point where she can actually give certain enemies weaknesses. So for example, if the enemy is not, I think there's like a tiered system, but if the enemy is null, then they'll become resist. If the enemies resist, they'll become just normal. And then if the enemy doesn't have anything resist or null, then they will actually become weak to that sort of element. So she can actually implant weaknesses into that. Her kit also provides def down on skill 1. On skill 2, it's an increase, I believe, or attack increase. And then skill 3 is a big one, where it increases crit. I think it increases crit. One of the skills increases crit, and then basically also does that weakness implant as well. Super beneficial, does a lot of work as well. Obviously with her passive as well, increased attack generally as well. She becomes very, very like versatile in terms of basically putting her into any team essentially. And yeah, she's essentially just like Phoebe as well as like Okian, any offensive navigator basically on steroids, especially with that weakness implant. It definitely does wonders as well, especially in more difficult fights when you know, eventually when they come to global, for example. Essentially, she's just definitely a must pull. And the reason why I have her in A1 tier is because to actually get to that weakness implant or that weakness sort of zone, you actually need to stack up or get a chance of getting hack complete on a certain sort of unit or whoever unit that you sort of select on the abilities. And that's actually a percentage chance at A0, but at A1, it's actually 100% chance. So you basically can skill 1 straight away, you'll get the hack complete, and then you can implant weaknesses or just, you know, increase weakness damage, for example, straight away with her A1, which is why I feel like her A1 is definitely the most valuable A1 probably across the board in this list. Actually, maybe it can be argued, but her A1 is really, really good. I highly recommend getting Futaba and her A1, just because when you can get that hack complete, it makes her utility like basically shoot through the roof with a 100% guarantee of getting hack complete, which is a 100% guarantee of a weakness implant or weakness increased damage. Very, very good unit. I know a lot of people are harping on about Futaba. She's definitely another must-pull unit in this game, so that's why I definitely recommend it for sure. Now, Cherish is also moving to standard. I have not much to say about Cherish if I'm being completely honest. Very, very, very solid tank unit. Can do a lot of healing, a lot of buffing as well. Can pair very, very well with Yusuke when, you know, if you have pulled Yusuke, for example, then Cherish is definitely one of his best in slot teammates and can just, you know, just do a lot of defensive work for you as well as sort of tank damage as well. And can keep you alive a lot. I use Cherish a lot within my playthrough of the game. But again, Cherish moves to standard. So do what you will with that information. I personally won't be pulling from him to guarantee him, so I'll roll the dice on standard for Cherish. Now, next on the list is Haru, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Personally, I've actually never actually used Haru before, or I've actually seen her being used properly before. Now, from what I hear about Haru is that she can deal out a lot of damage. She is obviously a side DPS carry, but I feel like with her kit, I don't know if it's anything special, but basically it sort of functions the same way, a little bit like Yannisik. Now, I could be completely wrong about that. Don't roast me in the comments because I actually don't really know that much about Haru. So that's why I put it in the skip tier. But essentially, she basically increases her damage based on effect hit rate. And she essentially, with her skill 1, gives people sight. And when you give people sight, essentially it's basically like a debuff. And then when you hit them with a gun skill, for example, it actually increases the damage, it increases the crit rate. I think it increases the crit damage as well. So what you want to do is you want to spread and try and use as many sort of sight abilities as possible, whether it not be Haru or Haru's teammates, for example. And then obviously you want a lot of effect hit rate, which could be very, very difficult to build, especially in Revelations, for example, or your Revelation cards. And then once sort of most people have, you know, certain sights and whatnot, she can also hit them with gun skills and or her gun herself, and then also get passive buffs as well. And some of these passive buffs, depending on how many stacks and stuff that you could get increased like attack and defense up, you can increase crit rate, increase crit damage. So you basically just want to hit as many enemies as you can, then hit them with gun skills, proc the sort of additional abilities and passives, and then you just increase your base damage as well. Now, overall, she's an okay unit. I have definitely seen people utilize her to like their max potential, but I don't really necessarily know if actually people are still using her in any sort of endgame content whatsoever, unless it's like a side weakness, for example. So in my opinion, I'm going to skip Haru, but I know a lot of people really, really love Haru. She's not a bad unit by any means. I don't think any of these units are like really, really bad, for example. But yeah, in my opinion, I feel like she just doesn't, she's not as cool as the other units, and she doesn't do as much damage. But again, I'm probably not the best person to talk about this, but essentially that's what her kit does. You can just think of it as like a Yannisik on steroids, essentially, where you can mark enemies and then basically hit them with additional damage. And then when you do that, you actually get increased sort of attack, defense, crit rate, crit damage, that sort of thing. All right, so the next unit is 5-star Mont. Now, originally I had 5-star Mont at skip. And that's because I feel like her kit is a little bit clunky, just because she's actually a dual element carry. So she's actually wind as well as ice. And I feel like it's a little bit fiddly in terms of actually her kit and how to actually play her. But because I really, really do like Mont, and I feel like it's a definite upgrade to the 4-star version, obviously, I feel like Mont is probably going to be into the pull category, just because her design is really cool. And she's a dual element carry as well, which is the only one I believe so far in this game, and the only one so far in the foreseeable future as well. So I guess in terms of her pull value, or value in general, she's pretty good, just because she can actually, because she's dual element, essentially you can set up 2 different teams. Now she actually scales of how many wind and ice allies you actually have in the team. So definitely pair her up with ice and wind supports. Cherish is obviously like probably one of the best ice supports, for example. You can use Morgana as a healer, for example, for the wind. But her kits essentially do what other kits do, or what you kind of expect. So wind, you're just playing around winded and you increase damage, for example. There's obviously nuances to that. I'm not going to get into too much detail about it. And then obviously with ice, for example, you're trying to inflict freeze, and then when the enemy's frozen, you get increased damage and stuff like that. That is a very, very crude way of putting it. She does a lot more. She can swap between the 2 elements at pretty much any time. So because of her value in terms of the dual element typing, as well as just being like an overall, like, you know, good, decent DPS. The reason why I say she's inconsistent is because obviously you kind of have to set up the team in a way where it kind of complements either one or the other. You can't necessarily do both, otherwise you're not going to maximize the damage, but you can, obviously. So in that regard, that's why I kind of put her originally into the skip tier, because it's a little bit clunky to play. But in terms of being dual element DPS, and that you can basically slot her into pretty much any team, as long as you have sort of at least 1 or 2 sort of ice or wind supports, then that's why I feel like that she is actually probably into the pull tier. Now, do with that information what you will. Very crude way of pulling her, of discussing her kit. She obviously does a lot more than that. But ostensibly, that's essentially what she is. She's just a dual DPS carry, dual element carry, sorry. So very flexible in that regard, can be very useful in terms of sort of, end game content, especially if, with specifically wind as well as ice sort of weaknesses. So I feel like she is probably, if you pull for her, you definitely won't be disappointed. So that's all I'm trying to say. And then the next unit is RUNA. There's honestly not much to say about RUNA. RUNA is the best debuffer in the game. One of the best debuffs in the game. Works super well, is definitely an upgrade on Ki. For example, she just does so much utility, more so than Ki, and can actually slot into a lot more teams than Ki, because Ki is very, very much reliant on burning, whereas RUNA is not necessarily reliant on burning. She is a fire sort of debuffer, for example, but not reliant on burning. She can just do general debuffs as well, but basically is one of the best debuffs in the game. And I highly, highly recommend that you pull for RUNA. I think RUNA does move to standard. So if you, again, don't want to guarantee, then roll the dice on standard. But RUNA is a very, very good debuffer. I highly, highly recommend that you get RUNA for sure. Slots into most teams, and that's pretty much all I have to say. Now, Violet for me, I absolutely love Sumire. I love her Persona 5 arc, and I love her in Persona 5 Royal. I think she's a great single target blessed DPS. Can do follow-ups as well. But basically what you're trying to do is just stack up her, I think it's, what's it called, like pose or like blessing or like dance or something. You're trying to stack that up, and then essentially once you stack that up to max, you can actually do an additional follow-up and or just do the attack outright. And the attack does so much damage. The scaling and the multiplier on that attack when you max the stacks, for example, on blessing stacks, is absolutely insane. So you can essentially skill 3 to essentially follow up on whoever you skill 3 on, very similar to Yui in that regard. But then eventually, when you get the stacks, you can actually go into her alternate form, and then in her alternate form, she can basically just do a shit ton of damage. And her burst in general is probably, I think it is one of the highest burst damages in the game. Essentially, it's absolutely insane. And honestly, like if you really like Violet, you definitely won't be disappointed in pulling for her, and you definitely won't be disappointed in pulling her kit. If you're on the fence about Violet, just know that eventually, you know, when her character and stuff comes out on global, I'll be doing more videos on her. You can definitely check that out when she comes out. But she does an insane amount of damage. She is single target, so that's, I guess, the caveat with that. But because she does a lot of damage, even on her skills as well in general, being a bless sort of DPS unit, I guess, even on her skills, she does a lot of damage, so she can clear out enemies very quickly, even though being single target. But Violet's very good. And then, yeah, if you want to pull for her, definitely go for it. The next is 5-star Wind. Now, 5-star Wind is another one of those units where I feel like it's definitely a must pull because the amount of crit that she gives and buffs that she gives is just absolutely insane. Now, again, without going over into her kit into too much detail, she just provides all the crit buffs essentially. And those crit buffs are just absolutely insane. The multipliers are insane. And then she has a crit buff on one of her skills, and then on her ult as well, just buffs every single unit. Is probably the best buffer in the game, I feel like. In certain situations, I think maybe Turbo could be probably up there. But in general, 5-star Wind, very good. And the reason why I put her into the A1 category as well is because on her skill 1, she actually inflicts a debuff called Wither, which is kind of like winded a little bit, but essentially it increases wind damage on that character by a certain amount. But on her A1, the wind damage effect actually becomes all element damage. So because wind damage is very niche, there's not many wind DPS carries. Like if you pair her up with Florette, for example, then obviously that will work wonders. But because there's not many wind DPS carries, then if you do all element damage onto the A1, and which is basically what Wither will do on her A1, and then it just becomes so much more versatile. The unit becomes so much more consistent, and you can actually get the additional Wither debuff or Wither proc as well on any element damage essentially, and it will increase the element damage on those enemies that are inflicted with Wither. So in that regard, her A1 is, in my opinion, is actually probably necessary rather than actually like a really good upgrade. Whereas the other ones, I guess Futaba's is probably necessary as well. Cord is probably a good upgrade, but Futaba's and Winds are definitely necessary just to make their kits more versatile and just more utility, have more utility basis, for example. But 5-star Wind, definitely highly recommend pulling one of the other probably must pull characters in the game. Now, I can go on and on about 5-star or Rin Lion Dance. I absolutely love her. I think she's an amazing unit, can do a lot of fire AoE DPS damage. She can also follow up and do a lot of technical damage, which is an increase in the damage, basically the damage cap and damage dealt, for example. I'm A16, I16, regardless of what tier list or whatever. I just really love Rin. I think Rin is the best girl in this game. Not much to say, she just does a shit ton of fire AoE DPS damage. You think Arn did a lot of damage? I mean, she does, but Rin will do an insane amount more. And yeah, I'm sure you've seen probably clips online about Rin doing a shit ton of damage in critical, in technical damage as well on her skill 3. So yeah, A6 R6 for me, hands down. Now, Matoi for me actually was a skip for sure. But actually, she pairs very well with 5-star Rin as sort of like a debuff sort of unit. And I feel like I probably will pull for her, but I guess we'll have to sort of wait and see. But regardless, Matoi does a lot of debuffing, especially with defense shred, for example, on her skill 3. But she can also gain stacks on skill 1 and stuff like that. But she actually does a lot of technical damage as well. So when you actually have 2 technical damage dealers on the team, you can actually and pretty much just like increase damage cap by quite a lot. And because that's why she's probably very good for 5-star Rin. And then on a technical DPS carry, for example, which I don't actually think there's that many, to be honest. I think it's really only like a few people. But regardless, she's a very good technical damage dealer. But she's actually just a very good debuffer overall. Def Shred is insane. And yeah, I mean, Dev Shred in general in this game is just really good. So having her do that as well as follow up with more technical damage, for example, is really good. So in that regard, I probably will pull for Matoi just because she's probably one of the best in slot supports for 5-star Rin. But other than that, if you're not really looking for 5-star Rin, then Matoi kind of loses a little bit of value. She is a decent debuffer, but I do feel like RUNA is probably the better debuffer in that sense. But Matoi can also slot into other teams. But I think she's definitely probably more suited towards 5-star Rin. But again, that's just my opinion. I'm sure people will come up with other ways to build Matoi. But I do really like her character. I think her character is really cool. She's like a firefighter or ex-firefighter. But anyway, she's pretty good debuffer. And then, yeah, just because she pairs well 5-star Rin, that's why I'll be pulling for her. All right, so next up on the list is Goro Akechi. Now, he is the only almighty DPS carry in this game. And I feel like the reason why I've had him in the skip, and so many people are probably going to come at me in the comments, but the reason why he's a skip is because his multipliers on his skills are not that great. He doesn't actually do that much damage. And being an almighty carry, you feel like, with almighty in the name, you feel like he must do so much damage. Now, I do know that buffs are coming to him in other regions, and if they tweak some of the multipliers a little bit, then I definitely feel like he'll definitely move up here for sure as one of those characters that I highly recommend to pull. But at this point in time, I feel like he just doesn't do as much damage as any other DPS units that I've sort of noted. And considering that Almighty doesn't actually feel Almighty yet, I feel like he is a little bit of a skip. When the buffs do come out, it'll be interesting to see what the numbers are. And if the numbers are actually pretty good, then I do feel like he'll probably be into the pull category. But again, if you like Akechi, and a lot of people do like Akechi, definitely go and pull for him. You won't be disappointed. But just know that his damage sort of capabilities in terms of compared to the other DPS carries in this game is a little bit lackluster, in my personal opinion. But I think that's the same sentiment shared by a lot of people as well. But overall, I think he's a fine unit. If you do pull for him, I don't necessarily think you'll be disappointed at all. The next is Turbo. Now, Turbo for me, again, is probably one of the best buffers in the game. Just because she does a lot around crit and attack buffs in general, and she actually has 2 different forms that she can go into that does essentially like 2 different things. But she will move to standard again with all these standard units. If you want to pull for them, go for it. I will definitely pull for Turbo because she's best in slot teammate for another character coming up in Makoto Yuki, in my opinion, just because it gives a lot of value in terms of that team. But we'll eventually move to standard. So, if you want to try your luck in the pool of standard units, then definitely go for it. Because considering that all of these standard units are actually very, very good, then I wouldn't actually be too disappointed if you just wait until all the go to standard, I guess, and just roll all your tickets and hopefully get one of the units. But Turbo for me, I really like Turbo's design. I really like Turbo's Phantom Thief design. I think she looks absolutely dope. And then, yeah, she's a great buffer unit as well. And I definitely will be pulling for her. But again, she moves to standard, so do with that information. Next, we have Ange. Now, Angie is probably the best navigator in the game, and/or co-best navigator with Futaba. Angie's absolutely sick, by the way. Her design is so cute. It's so dope. Her persona design is actually absolutely sick. And in general, the way that she does like her skills and animations in general, it just honestly just feels premium. So the reason why she's so good is because she basically gives extra turns, and she can actually also heal. So you can actually kind of run sustainless teams because she actually just does a lot of healing in general. So skill 1 is pretty simple. You basically just get an attack buff, and then you get 4 stacks of these, what's it called? It's Holy Songs, I think it's called Holy Songs. And then skill 2 is the heal. So you essentially do like a once-off heal and get more stacks of Holy Songs. And then actually when you get up to 12 stacks of Holy Song, you actually just immediately proc the heal. So again, you can run like sustainless teams, for example. But skill 2 also is actually a dispel on a debuff as well, which is very, very good. And then skill 3 is essentially just a penetration rate up and an attack increase as well. Obviously, the multipliers sort of dictate the amount of power that Angie actually has. But with her additional turn, so when she actually procs Myriad Song, which is the additional turn, she basically essentially gives the character that she's dispelling the debuff to an extra turn, and that extra turn actually rewinds sort of the turn to before that character took a turn. So all that really means for you, I know it sounds a bit confusing, but all that really means is you get an extra turn. And if you have a skill that actually has to be on cooldown, so for example, Chord's skill 3, which gives the additional highlight, will actually go on cooldown for 2 turns. You can actually just do that again because it will rewind that before you use the skill. So if you use the skill and then that skill will normally remain on cooldown for 2 turns. If Ange actually procs the Myriad Song and then gives Chord an additional turn, you can actually use that skill again, essentially rewinding the skill cooldown. So in that regard, you can already tell how much value that she provides. She provides a lot of healing, a lot of buffs, and as well as the extra turn. So arguably she's one of the best navigators in the game between her and Futaba in certain situations. You can run sustainless team comps with her. Because the heal, I believe the ratio on the heal is actually insane. It's actually like pretty decent. It's probably not as insane as like a fully built Marion, for example, but it's actually really, really decent. So you can run sustainless team comps. And in that way, when you run sustainless team comps, you can have an additional support unit. It just opens up a lot of different potential teams. And I feel like that's why she's definitely a must pull for sure. And the extra turn just helps out a lot, especially if you're trying to eke out every single, score possible in like endgame content. Now, the reason why I put her into the A1 category is because at her A1, when she starts battle, she actually gains max stacks of Holy Song, which essentially means that she has a heal ready to go. But in addition to that, she also decreases her Feith cooldown or her Navigator cooldown by 4 turns, which essentially means that after 1 turn or in turn 2, you essentially can use all her abilities no matter what. And then additionally to that as well, is that on her skill 3, she actually gives an additional, I think it's like 12 or 15% crit rate when you use her skill 3, in addition to all her skill 3 benefits and buffs as well. So I feel like her A1 is insane value, not necessarily a must pull for example, like Futaba and Wind, that makes them extremely more utility and consistent. But with Ange's, it's definitely a massive upgrade. And just having the ability to go into a turn straight up or go into a battle straight up and start using your navigator skills, super, super good. You get basically a free turn of buffs essentially, and obviously with the extra turn proc as well. All right, now we are getting into the P3R collab as well as obviously Berry, as you can see down here. So in my opinion, Makoto Yuki is 100% going to be A6R6 for me. I feel like, originally I had Makoto Yuki as just a pull, but Makoto Yuki does a shit ton of damage. Just an absolute shit ton of damage. He's one of my favorite Persona protagonists as well. And I feel like he's the best single target fire DPS. It's just single target DPS in general. He is fire element. But he just does a lot of damage. On skill 1, especially if you build crit rate and crit damage on him, again, pairs very, very well with someone like 5-star Wind, for example. Does a lot of damage on skill 1. And then once you get enough stacks on the skill 1 to do skill 3, oh my god, you actually just eliminate bosses. Like bosses with the big HP bar, nah, just gone. Just absolutely just gone. And then A6R6, for example, like just absolutely insane. Insane. Yukari, on the other hand, is absolutely insane. Sustain unit, probably the best sustain unit in the game. Arguably with Marion, I guess, but she's an insane sustain unit. She can do additional defense increase and damage, like less damage on your teammates with skill 2. She can inflict a debuff. Can't remember what the debuff's called, but she can inflict the debuff on a skill 1. And basically, every time an enemy hits that debuffed enemy, you actually heal and you proc a heal, and it does insane healing and actually scales off Yukari, for example. It's not just like a flat rate of heal. And then, yeah, just those 2 skills alone just increases her value a lot. Very, very good buffing unit in terms of like defense and keeping you alive, and very, very good at sustaining as well. So yeah, honestly, not much more to say. Insane value in terms of a kit, in my personal opinion. Now, her actually specifically, I will mention that her weapon is definitely not necessary whatsoever. 4-star equivalent is 100% the way to go. But if you want it, it'll be an upgrade. But yeah, just Yukari in general, very, very good sustain unit. Akihiko, again, super, super, super good. And I have made a video about this as well. He is probably one of the best. I still think he's one of the best AoE DPS carries in general. He is of the electric element. He just does a lot of damage, like a lot of AoE damage. He's actually insane. And I'm pretty sure, I don't think, if you build him properly, I don't think you ever just not crit. And if you just not crit, like ever not crit, or just always crit, for example, like you just do insane damage. His kit is just very, very well rounded. His awareness is actually really, really good, especially at I believe it's A1. And then obviously A6 is just absolutely insane. You actually get an additional follow-up to a follow-up on skill 3, which is absolutely just bonkers. But Akihiko just does a lot of damage, and yeah, it's definitely a pull, especially if you like Akihiko, for example. You 100% won't be disappointed with Akihiko. And then the next unit is Berry. Now, Berry, I actually can't believe a unit like Berry actually exists. Like the amount of animations and the amount of just potential that Berry has in terms of curse DPS teams. She is a single target curse DPS. In terms with Mesa, for example, for dot procs. and then maybe potentially future characters with more DOT effects. She's an absolutely insane enabler while also doing insane damage herself. I did pull for her on Taiwan, for example, and I can't wait to get her weapon, fingers crossed. I just feel like she's just absolutely insane unit, and I really love her design, and I feel like A6R6 is the appropriate tier for for Berry. But yeah, essentially just does a lot of damage, can proc DOT, and yeah, just again, damage. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my summon guide. I know it's a very long-winded video, or a very long window video in general. But I just wanted to go through all the units as to why I think they skips, blah, 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 move to standard, A0, R0, A1s, for example. So hopefully you did enjoy it. Hopefully you saw some value in the pull guide. I will have timestamps in the description just in terms of each character. So if you want to skip to a specific character that you're looking at for the other regions or coming to global, for example, then definitely go for that one. But overall, I think this is a fair enough list. Again, it's all based on my opinion. But let me know in the comments down below who you think, is a pull, is a must pull, is a skip, etc., etc. Definitely want to find out sort of the general consensus of the P5X community. But I feel like this list is actually probably okay, and I'm quite happy with this list in general. So don't forget to leave a like and subscribe on the video. I really appreciate all the support recently. It's been absolutely insane. So it's been just an amazing time in general. And again, thanks for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.